James Gray.
I'm listening carefully to his interesting speech on an extremely important subject, which is very damaging to our meat industry and to our farmers. I'm just not certain by the logic that government cuts to local authority and government cuts in other ways, in the sort of way that he's describing, he's politicising what should be actually a non-political discussion. We all hate the notion of horse meat in burgers. It's nothing to do with government cuts, it's to do with the way in which the supermarkets are buying cheaper and cheaper and cheaper burgers from doubtful sources. That's what it's about.
Mr. James Gray.
Thank you very much indeed. I wasn't necessarily intending to speak at any great length, but I have been inspired by the contribution of the Honourable Gentleman for Croydon North and congratulate him on such an excellent speech so early in his parliamentary career. I'm not sure that in my 15 years here I've quite achieved the expertise that he has done in a few months, and it was very well a most useful introduction to what's an extremely important and interesting debate. I did take issue with him to a degree because I felt that what is actually a cross-party issue, he had slightly strayed into party political issues and seeking to blame the government and everything to do with the government for a really appalling incident over Christmas when horse meat was found in burgers and supermarkets. I'm not certain that actually government cuts to local authorities and the other things he listed necessarily can be directly blamed for it, and I felt that was an unfortunate part of his speech. But I think that overall the point that he was making is an extremely important one, namely that even a slight trace, as my honourable friend from Wales, from Brecon Radnorshire pointed out, even the smallest traces of DNA in a burger could damage consumer confidence to an extraordinary degree. We've seen it before in Edwina curry with eggs, we've seen it with beef in other times since then. And just the slightest hint that supermarket burgers may not be up to scratch could lead to a disproportionate effect on the burger industry, on the supermarket industry, and therefore on farmers. And I particularly speak on behalf of farmers in my own constituency of North Wiltshire, where we have a significant beef production industry. And I pay tribute, incidentally, in passing, for example, to McDonald's, who now source all of their beef from UK sources, which is an extremely worthwhile thing for them to have done. And it'd be appalling if confidence, for example, in the excellent McDonald's product, I haven't held no brief from McDonald's, but nonetheless, the excellent McDonald's product, were undermined by this particularly unfortunate incident. Of course.
Mr. Hugh
And introducing it, I also want to congratulate the Honourable Gentleman in making a very good contribution. But could I just illustrate the importance of the issue with trading standards locally? The provenance of food locally is also important because the UK is unique amongst EU nations in having the highest proportion of food retail and beverages from sales from shops and restaurants as well, of all EU nations. We are the highest of it, so it is vitally important. So trading standards are critical, and there was even within the last month an example where trading standards picked up in the southwest an illustration where lamb kebabs, which everybody likes to get late at home going back, was found to contain chicken, beef, poultry and other assorted goodies within that. So it is important that we keep up trading standards locally as well.
Mr. James Gray.
I'm most grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. I entirely agree with him. It's about to come on in a moment to talk about trading standards and the way in which we can restore consumer confidence in what they're buying. If consumers believe the thing which they are buying is different to the thing which says on the packet, they'll stop buying it. And that damages not only the dodgy products, if you like, and I think some supermarkets have been guilty under commercial pressures of buying products at a lower price than they would reasonably have done, not only the dodgy products, but it also damages the first-class products. And therefore I very much agree with his honourable friend for Croydon North, and indeed his remarks, when he says that the important thing is that we have got to have strong local trading standards, we've got to have a strong FSA, we've got to have a strong government controls to make sure that the highest possible standards of food in our supermarkets are maintained. And that particularly applies, of course, in this case, with regard to meat and beef and, in this case, horse-contaminated products. I therefore agree with the broad thrust of the Honourable Gentleman for North Croydon in the remarks that he made, and I look forward to hearing from my honourable friend the Minister as to how we can be certain that we can restore that consumer confidence. I do, however, if I may, just wish to touch on a particular aspect of the Honourable Gentleman's speech with which I rather disagreed, and also the intervention from his honourable friend touched this particular point. They seem to be indicating that if the system in the UK for the control of the killing of horses were somehow or another better, that therefore an incident like this would be less likely to occur. And they touched, if you recall, Mr. Amos, on the government's recent abolition of the National Equine Database and on the issue of the way in which horse passports operate. Now, I remember attending a debate in this very chamber with none other than the Right Honourable Gentleman for Whitney, arguing very passionately in 2005 that horse passports were a complete and utter waste of time, and committing himself when he came to power to abolishing them. I keep reminding him of this, and he hasn't yet got around to it, but I'm confident that sooner or later he may go down that track. The idea behind horse passports, when they were introduced in the first place, was that on that horse passport, every single medicine administered to a horse would be stamped, particularly, as the Honourable Gentleman mentioned, bute is a very common medicine, and not only amongst racehorses, he mentioned, but also amongst ordinary hacks very often will take bute, and that is harmful or could be harmful to human beings. It's very important that those horses go into the food chain, or they should not go into the food chain, and that abattoirs should know that they've taken bute and therefore prevent them from going into food chains. The idea was every horse, something like 2 million of them, we don't quite know, but something like 2 million, getting on for 2 million in the UK, every horse should have a passport. And on that passport would be stamped every time they go to the vet, and then when they appeared at the abattoir would say, no, Mr. Horse, you've had bute, you can't come in here, please go away again. Now, from the start, that was a ridiculously flawed principle. First of all, there's a basic flaw in it, which is that you might persuade horse owners such as me to buy a horse passport when they first get the horse. Very, very difficult to remember to go and cancel it when the horse dies. And we already know that of the something like 750,000 horse passports in circulation in the UK today, about half of them are of dead horses. So entirely a meaningless document, and a very, very large number of horses, particularly low-value horses, the ones belonging to a variety of groups of people who have very low-value horses, they have no passports at all. The system, in fact, is blown wide open. Decent, sensible, ordinary horse owners actually get around to buying these things. The people who are criminally trying to give their horse into the human consumption chain do not, and therefore by definition doesn't work. Now that error, that failure of a system, was compounded by the so-called National Equine Database, and incidentally I'll just pick up the Honourable Gentleman one little point, which is, of course, the NED didn't cost the government anything. It was run by the passport issuing authorities who paid for it, so it wasn't actually saving money abolishing it. It was abolished because it wasn't working. An enormous computer with a list of animals on it who die at the rate of 100,000 a year and who are born all over the place and no one can know where they live is an absolutely worthless piece of bureaucracy. It cannot keep an accurate record of where all the horses are. It simply didn't work. It wasn't even beginning to work, wasn't even coming close to working, and the government very sensibly realised it wasn't. I hope they'll go further at some stage or other and abolish horse passports and challenge the European Union in doing so, but that's a matter for another debate, Mr. Amos, rather than for today. So the NED simply wasn't working. Of course.
Mr. Glenn Davis.
Allowing me to intervene, because I have a past in taking the same view that he does on horse passports, in the view that they wouldn't work. And will he agree with me that the issue is particularly relevant where there are a great number of wild horses? And what we've seen, because of the bureaucracy surrounding passports and ownership, that the likelihood of when they are dying and when they are being got rid of is far greater because of the fear of in some way getting into trouble. And that's one reason why the whole industry isn't run properly, and it's particularly relevant in places like North Wales where there are huge numbers of wild horses.
Mr. James Gray.
My honourable friend makes an extremely important point, and one to which I was about to move on in 1 second, but speaking as he does for North Wales, this is a very large problem there, but also across the rest of particularly England and less so Scotland and elsewhere in the UK. So the fact of the matter is the NED and horse passports do not, by definition, cannot by definition prevent horse medicines going into the food chain, and cannot, for that reason, either can they prevent horse meat going into the human food chain here in the UK. They simply don't work, and it doesn't achieve that. Now, one solution to all of this would be a very simple one, which is there are only about, I thought it was 7,500, maybe 8,500 horses a year go to the, I think, 1 or perhaps 2 functioning abattoirs that still take horses in the UK. An incredibly small number, something like 100,000 horses a year die. 7,000 will go to the abattoirs. So an extraordinarily small percentage of the actual horses that die in the UK are killed in abattoirs. Mainly they're shot by the vet and either buried on farm or given, very commonly given to packs of foxhounds to consume after they've been shot. That's a very normal way of disposing of horse carcasses. A very, very small number indeed go to the abattoir. All of those that do go to the abattoir are then exported overseas on the hook, as it were, for eating in Italy and elsewhere. Now, many of us, many purists who think that the notion of eating a horse is a disgusting idea, would say, fine, let us abolish the killing of horses in the UK. Actually, let's do away with it. It's a very, very small number of them. Let's just abolish the abattoir, and therefore you abolish the need for horse passports. If you can't take a horse to an abattoir, you don't need a horse passport to prove it hasn't taken bute in the last couple of years. But that's a possible solution. Either way round, I don't believe that the way that the horse passport regime works and the NED works and the way that the abattoirs in the UK work has anything at all to do with the scandal of horse meat and burgers. That was coming from elsewhere around the world. It wasn't coming from the UK. No one's suggesting the UK abattoirs somehow or other were feeding horse meat into these burgers in supermarkets. They weren't. And therefore to say that somehow or other the horse passport system is bad or the NED shouldn't have been abolished and something to do with abattoirs in the UK, that's got nothing to do with what we're discussing today, Mr. Amos. And that's why, finally, I'd just like to come back to press the Minister a little bit on this. It does seem to me that if the government has any primary duty to consumers, it must be to say to consumers what you are buying in the supermarket is A, what you believe you are buying. First of all, you must, the label, what it says in the tin must be what you find inside the box. And if it isn't, then there's a slippage somewhere, whether that be the Food Standards Agency or whether it be the local trading standards people or other things. There's a slippage somewhere. First of all, it must be what it says in the box. And second, it must be of the highest possible quality. Our farmers depend on the consumer relying on top quality products in the supermarket. And if the consumer begins to believe that somehow or other they may be contaminated, whether that be because they're Muslims or whether that be because they don't like eating horses or whether it be for other reasons, the moment they begin to think that meat or that food product in any way is contaminated, they're going to stop buying it. And that has an extraordinarily bad knock-on effect on our food producers across the nation. So I think the government do have an absolutely fundamental duty to discover what went wrong here, to put it right, to consider whether or not the newly established supermarket ombudsman may have a role to play here, possibly in examining the way that the purchases are made. But at all events, I want to be able to say to my consumers in my constituency, what you buy in the supermarket is exactly what you think you're buying and is of the highest possible quality. There is no possibility of cross-contamination by horse meat or in any other way, and you will be getting precisely what it says on the tin. And I very much hope when my honourable friend winds up the debate this morning, a very important debate, and I congratulate the honourable gentleman for North Croydon in calling it. When he winds up this very important debate this morning, he will be able to put at rest the minds not only of consumers across North Wiltshire, but also of the food producers in my constituency.
Mr. James Gray.
About the Republic of Ireland, and I think there is a question to be asked here about the degree to which the public are guilty of less high standards than we would have in the United Kingdom. I heard of a case this week where a horse with a decent passport was exported to Southern Ireland to be administered drugs where the passport was not changed, and the horse then re-imported into the UK, so it apparently had a clean passport despite having been given drugs in the Republic. I think one or two things with regard to the public's practices might need to be examined with some care.
I thank the honourable gentleman for that comment as well. He's illustrated it very well. I think there is a question that we have in our minds in relation to the standards that there are in neighbouring countries close by and ones that have to be addressed.